Britain has descended into an energy crisis. Rocketing energy costs will mean the average domestic fuel bill will have risen by over £400 in a year. Fuel at the pumps has never been so expensive. And some food prices have seen a hike of over 40%. Many people are being pushed into poverty.
Possibly the biggest crisis that this country faces in the next few years is that within 6 or 7 years we're going to lose 40% of all the generating capacity, all the power stations that actually are keeping our lights on, our computers running, the whole of our civilization working. When that happens, we will be in one of the biggest crises this country has ever faced.
With North Sea production in sharp decline, the UK is heavily reliant on imported coal, oil and gas. And all but one of our nuclear power stations will shut down in the next 7 years. It leaves a substantial gap, and Britain at the mercy of global energy markets. But at this most vulnerable time, the UK government has lost control of British energy policy to the European Union, with catastrophic consequences. EU environmental directives will force the premature closure of our vital coal-fired power stations and have imposed unachievable and costly emissions targets that have distorted the UK energy strategy and left it with few viable options. Britain is out of control, and it is costing the earth.
We are paying the price for three things in this country in terms of energy. One is the fact that we had all that North Sea oil and gas, which meant for 20 years we didn't have to think about where we were going to get our energy from in the future. The second has been the sort of environmental wave which led us to lose touch with the value of nuclear power stations. They became a dirty word and no one wanted to build any new ones. The third thing is that we are completely hamstrung by what Brussels is deciding about renewables, about biofuels, and about lots of other things to do with our energy, the closing down of our coal-fired power station. So we are no longer in any way masters in our own house. So we are uniquely making a mess of it.
What the energy issue is doing is bringing the British people for the very first time hard up against the facts of life of being in the European Union.
The chaos started here. The EU issued a range of environmental directives imposing onerous targets for reduction of carbon emissions. It demands that by 2020, 20% of our energy needs come from renewable sources. But this precludes using proven alternatives to fossil fuels such as nuclear power. So the UK is being driven relentlessly down the road of unviable and more costly solutions such as biofuels and wind turbines. The UK government's headlong leap into their current energy strategies is skewed towards meeting those crippling obligations rather than securing long-term sources of energy for Britain.
90% of our energy supplies are going to disappear over the next 20 years. For Britain, it doesn't matter what we do about CO2 so far as climate change is concerned. We emit about 2.5% of the world's CO2 per year. If we disappeared off the face of the earth, that 2.5% would be replaced by China every 3 years. So the issue for Britain is overwhelmingly how do we secure our energy supplies in the best possible way, and by best we mean secure and cost-effective ways.
Yeah, well, you've got this massive contradiction in the EU's policy. It says we've got to cut down on CO2 emissions, therefore we've got to have lots of renewable energy. But of course the best, by far the most efficient way to get the maximum amount of energy is by building nuclear power stations. But that's not included in the renewables targets.
The irony is, the cost of building 10 nuclear power stations in the UK, which would provide up to 25% of our energy requirements, would be less than 2 years' contributions to the EU. signing up to the unachievable EU targets comes with a monumental cost, and the UK government is funding it by a range of stealth and so-called green taxes, now making up almost 10% of UK government revenue. A government-commissioned report has warned that because the UK has currently such a low base of renewable energy, it will cost each UK household more than £3,000, almost double the cost expected in France and Germany.
The strategy for us is to replace our national source of energy as present in the North Sea with a national source of energy under our own control, and the only possible candidate for this is nuclear power.
But EU directives are forcing the UK government down the wrong road in pursuit of renewables. So thousands of wind turbines will need to be built across the UK in locations such as here, in the Yorkshire Dales. Local campaign groups are being formed across England to combat the proliferation of such wind farms.
When I go around the constituency and see people and talk to people in village halls who are trying desperately to protect their villages from these grotesque developments, one of the main questions that they ask me is why. They don't work, they're not going to decommission a single power station, conventional power station. It's just a tragedy, a desecration of our island, and that's the question people are asking. To what end? This is in point of fact one of the great lunacies of the age. You'll see over here, behind me, this is Drax Power Station, which produces 4,000 megawatts of electricity. Even if I had a magic wand and I could produce here and now 12,000 wind turbines to meet the megawattage of Drax, it wouldn't make any difference. We'd still need Drax in the background because you need the backup because the wind doesn't blow. So it isn't even green.
In Germany, they have found that their 19,000 wind turbines have not resulted in the closure of any of their conventional power stations, as they have been retained as backup for when there is insufficient wind to turn the turbines, around 70% of the time. Power stations on immediate standby are also a very expensive way to generate electricity, the equivalent of cycling to work whilst a car journeys behind carrying your bags.
If we were foolish enough to build windmills, this would cost somewhere between 2 and 3 times the cost of building it via a nuclear station.
For the UK to commit to so many wind turbines in such a short time will require widespread extensions to the national grid. And whereas in a normal world the expense and inefficiency of these wind farms would price them out of the market, lavish subsidies make wind farms very lucrative. It is known as the renewables obligation, and a single turbine can potentially earn the operator £500,000 a year, of which 60% is subsidy.
The way it works with wind turbines is, or indeed any renewable source of electricity, is that the people who sell you and me electricity have to buy a percentage of their power from renewable sources, and they pay twice the normal price for it. So there is a massive hidden subsidy which we're all paying when we get our electricity bill.